You're gone. Dream of you. I dream of you. When you're in. Hey. Long time no chat. Something like that. Huh. There's a lot on my mind. There's a lot on my mind. I was gonna write it out. Probably still going to write it out. And build off of this entire praxis and movement in my mind that I'm working through. But I wanted to land here and talk about it. The questions that are deep on my mind are: 1. How are we holding people accountable? 2. What does accountability look like? 3. How are we holding people accountable with the data that we have received from our ancestors? 3 loaded questions that I kind of want to expand on. It may not be in order. So, over the past week, I have found myself in this hole. I found myself in my addiction hole. I found myself in my escaping hole. I found myself in a grief hole. I found myself in all the spaces that, not that I've run away from, but that are clear to me on when and how a fog can come towards me and what that looks like, and moving and transitioning out of that successfully in order to get to a forward place so that I can ask the questions again. I ran into someone that I haven't seen in a while, and I've really been thinking about those 3 questions. How do we hold people accountable? What does accountability look like? With the data that we've received from our ancestors, how are we building on accountability? I think that was the 3rd question. Something around that. If not, that's the question again. Or a new question. And as I write, as I read, as I draw, as I correspond with lovers, as I correspond with friends, as I correspond with acquaintances, as I correspond with people that I had just met, I'm really thinking through and feeling through how I show up in spaces and how I show up in the space of accountability, and accountability of not perpetuating harms. And it is not possible, I don't think, to come from a place where you cannot harm anyone at all. Let me say that again. I don't think that it is possible for you to come to a place where you do not harm anyone at all. And I say that with the understanding that perpetuating harm in the system of oppression, in the system of talking down to people, in the system of being in these spaces where we think that we are better than, do nothing but more harm. That's perpetuation of harm. If someone has experienced a death in their family and they come to me with this information and they're sharing and they want me to hold space, I'm not going to come from this space and tell them that they need to get over it. That's not what happens. That's not that's not helpful. It's more harmful than anything. If I'm in the space with someone who is a community member, and my community looks like a lot of people, right? Queer folks, trans folks, ethically non-monogamous folks, polyamorous people, white people, brown people, black people, indigenous folks, people of color, people who have completely different ethnic backgrounds than I do, completely different cultural backgrounds, and completely different religious backgrounds than I do, and practices that they currently do. But that doesn't bring me to the spot as someone who is studying and a student of life of all of these practices and cultures to disregard someone's experience. And the shift that we have currently right now in this political landscape that we are operating in, it's come to light to a lot of us, including myself, that we have tricked ourselves into thinking that we don't need anyone else. And like we do. Like, as someone who is a journalist, as someone who truly believes that our personal narratives are the drivers of the stories that make things move forward, I want to prioritize that. I want to prioritize the narratives that get lost to the wayside. And when I was chatting with this person that I ran into, like, I just really am in this space of accountability goes all ways. And it's not just a one-way street. And it's not just about political landscapes. It's about really understanding and digging within your own ori, your own psyche. It is about understanding who you are as a person and knowing that in order to hold space and in order to hold someone accountable, you must first hold yourself accountable. And it's not in the space of solely democracy. It's not in the space of being a liberal. It's not in the space of being all right. But it does relate to all of those things. And these are identities. Like, we all hold some kind of identity in this world. What we hold on to, and if someone is different than we are, if they are experiencing life differently than we are, does not mean that their experience is invalid. And I think the biggest thing for me right now is conceptualizing accountability and how that looks when we are a collective of biodiverse individuals, and how we as individuals can come together to work together so that we can abolish these systems of harm that we keep perpetuating. And this makes me so, this just drives me. It drives me. It takes me back to when I was an undergrad and I was in Europe, and when I was traveling through Amsterdam and experiencing the city as the only BIPOC person on a trip that I was with my colleagues with. And these are people that I had been in school with for nearly 4 years at this point. Some more than that. And I don't talk to anyone from that trip, aside from the people that I met when I was in Amsterdam, aside from the people that I met when I was in Brussels and Bruges and Paris. And I have kept in contact with folks that I met there because I find it important to understand culture outside of myself. And I'm not saying that I don't keep in contact with the folks that I went on the trip with because of that said factor. There were a lot of things that happened on that trip that I was naive to understand about myself. But I also was asking hard questions. And in order for people to understand themselves, sometimes other people have to ask questions, not as an instigation. Like, I didn't ask questions about trans misogyny and trans femininity and trans masculinity as a way to perpetuate more harm. Again, my perception was not to perpetuate harm, but it in fact did cause harm. Yet, the operations of trans misogyny exist and trans patriarchy exist because they are built inside of the systems that perpetuate those same harms. And I've spent my entire adult life since then. It's been like 10 years since I went on that trip. So for the past 10 years, I've been studying, I've been in therapy, I've been working through my shit, I've been doing the things. And I haven't heard from anybody on that trip. Aside from two people on that trip. And so I've just been thinking about like what it's like to be someone who's an outsider. But then I was just like, I've been that my whole life. Like, that doesn't bother me. And to be someone who's on the margins and who doesn't get a lot of space to share my narrative and to share my story unless I ask for it, then I don't know, like that is just, that's a whole thing. Like, having to put yourself in the rooms and having to show up in these spaces and then being the overseer that holds all the keys and not being, in a capitalist society, not being compensated for it. And also not being emotionally compensated for it is the most harm that you could do to someone. And so, like, how do I keep someone accountable? So I keep someone accountable by focusing on my small movements and focusing on my slow behaviors and really slowing down and listening to my body and taking action when I need to take action. As in, if I need to go drink water, I'm going to drink water. And yeah, these are small things, but the small things matter. This is the way I keep myself accountable, so then I can then hold other people accountable. And then there's this overscope of keeping other folks accountable by asking them the hard questions, even if it's uncomfortable for me to ask the questions, because I have been reprimanded for asking the hard questions. And so there are layers. We're complex people. People are complex. Humanity is complex because of the systems that have been built for us to exist in, or the systems that have been forced for us to exist in. Yet we come from these spaces where sometimes we've collected the information and now we're at a point where we're sitting with ourselves and maybe we're sitting in our room. Maybe we're sitting at a restaurant and we're eating a dinner by ourselves or with other people. And this happened to me today when I went to a restaurant. I just sat down with my little monies that I had, and I decided that I just wanted to like sit there and process. And so coming to the third question, when I think about my ancestors and all of our ancestors and how they have implemented our growth and implemented our expansion. For a long time, I've been in this space of only coming from a place of like negative pinpoints. And like, yeah, those things are important to understand and to recognize. But they are also things that did happen in the past. And my pattern recognition is on point. But it took a long time to get here. And it took a long time of recognizing that I don't have to be drunk to get here. And that's a real transparent, real obvious, not obvious, real honest here. And so when I was in the space tonight and thinking about my ancestors coming to me in dreams and renaming me, and then me taking the action to rename myself, and then coming to the point where there's a lot of information that filters through our dream space. And when we block ourselves off from our dreams, whether that be in the astral realm or the physical realm, if we block ourselves off from our dreams, if we think that we can't do the things, if we keep thinking that, we're going to feel it, and we're not going to do the things, and we're not going to keep dreaming, and we're not going to keep moving forward. You get what I'm saying here? So when we start recognizing that in ourselves, we can also start recognizing that in the greater picture, the greater entities that be. And you cannot rid of your ancestors. You can try it. You really can. You can try to scrub them off of your skin. You can try to cover them. But sometimes the whole point is to not be covered and to be seen. And in this time, in this crazy political landscape that we are in, being seen can be scary as fuck. And I'm just keeping it a buck here. Like, I'm not, like, we are actively in a world war. I don't have I'm going off the receipts here. Going off the things that I'm hearing, the things that I'm seeing, the things that I'm feeling. And I truly believe that. I truly believe that we are in an active world war. And with that being said, like, this is the time to keep dreaming. This is the time to keep thinking about solutions. Not only for ourselves, but for our communities. To think about infrastructure differently. To transition ourselves into someone we haven't been before. And maybe some of y'all are watching this and y'all are thinking, like, maybe I'll transition myself into a badass bitch, X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, yeah, do that. But also remember that ego crashes exist. And that it's not about harking on other people. It's not about utilizing your work so you're bringing other people down. It's the full scope here. If we're just giving out information to bring someone down, how are we holding people accountable? Because if we're bringing people down so that they are below our own feet, what does that make us? And so, when I think about my own ancestors and the collective consciousness, I'm really in this space and really in these expansive, transformative justice lenses on how we can transition from individualistic societies to collective societies, to care structures, to care and economies, to spaces where prisons don't exist, to spaces where jails don't exist, to spaces where freedom exists. And my understanding of freedom is freely existing in a state where harm is not the priority. That is what I believe is freedom. There is a balance to things. There is a balance to how we feel. If we were able to understand how to navigate calming down our nervous systems and really digging into somatics and really digging into how we can actually increase somatic healing processes, I don't think that we would be where we are. And so with us being in this really weird space where everything is on the rise, yet transforming and expanding internally in our internal mappings is something that we really need to be talking about, and something that we need to be talking about in circles and in spaces where we can chat with each other regardless of our differences. And I know that's like, okay, Mo, you're on like, little, regardless of your differences and blah, 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 X, Y, and Z. And I'm just like, yeah, it's a dreamscape. It is a dream. Yet I also like understand that at the end of the day, if we don't have jobs, if we don't have houses, if we don't have food, and some people are actually living in those spaces right now. By federal sanctioned social death and literal death. And if you're listening to this and you're here, I really want you to ask yourself, how are you holding yourself accountable? How are you holding other people accountable? What does accountability look like for you? And what, from the data you have received from your ancestors, whether that be in the astral realm, in the physical realm, your internal realm, wherever that is in your own sphere, what does accountability look like with the data that you have received from your ancestors? And that's something I want to keep processing. And that's something I want to keep talking about. So if you have thoughts, feel free to comment them. And feel free to message me. I'm on Instagram. That's pretty much the only platform I really utilize right now. And yeah, so here we are. I will talk with you next time. Keep it real, keep it grounded, keep creating, and I'll talk to you then. Hope you're here.